Hey guys, welcome to my workshop. So in today's video, we're going to start working on my bench. This is part 2 in my tiny workshop remodel series. If you haven't already, please go back and check out part 1 so that you know where we're at in this whole remodeling series. Now, I've never had a workbench in my workshop that I could beat and bang and hand plane and chisel on. So that's what this is going to be. I'm going to base it off of the plans for the Paul Sellers video. If you watch Paul Sellers making his, this is kind of based off of those, kind of loosely based off of it. It's also going to be based off a little bit of what Jimmy DiResta did with his. And I do like what Cody, Wrangler Star, what he did with his. Now he modeled his off of Paul Sellers, so I think I'm just following in his footsteps. But to start off, I went ahead and bought 4 2x6s that are 10 foot long, and essentially what I wanted is to find boards that were very straight and didn't have a lot of knots, didn't check a whole lot, and I found some good ones. You know, it took a little while. I had to really sort through the lumber at Lowe's. You know, Lowe's, Home Depot, they never have the greatest selection, so you really have to pick through it. And this top board here, it has some knots, but I'm not overly concerned because this is going to be used for a different part of this whole bench. But the bottom 3, what I'm going to do is cut them in half, because what I'm doing is making a 5 foot long bench top. And by cutting these in half, I'm going to gain a lot of space. Also, I'm going to cut the halves into slices so that I have 2x3s. And the reason why I'm doing this versus just buying 2x3s is, for instance, I can't buy a 5 foot 2x3. You just can't. Even if I bought a 10 foot 2x3, they are normally terribly checked in the store. If you go and look at them in the store, they're terrible, and they're just, you can't find a good 2x3 unless you go to a mill and you ask specifically for those. And that would be a whole different story. But I've decided to go this route by cutting these in half, cutting them in half, and I'm hoping to end up with about 12 of these, which will give me the proper width and depth that I want for this project. So I'm going to go ahead and get started ripping these down and cutting them down to what I want. Alright, so you're going to have to excuse the glasses. I have a little bit of an eye issue going on right now. So now I've got all these boards cut to the width. I only decided to cut the top so that all of these would line up without the groove. The bottom, I still have the rounded over edge from the original board. In the Paul Sellers video series, he actually did both sides with a hand plane and got rid of that rounded over edge. You can do that. For what I'm doing, I don't see it as a big deal. I'm going to end up putting some boards across the bottom to attach other things to it, so I'm not too overly concerned about that. But you know, at this point, I've got a board laid across my table saw. I've got a protective piece of paper here. This board is actually going to be used for a different project, so I don't want to get it messed up. But I have all of these here, and what I want to do is take a look at my boards and just kind of look for any sort of defects that I see. You know, most likely things like knots, maybe some holes here and there. And all I'm going to do is determine which side is going to be the front, which side I'm going to be using the most. And the way I have this positioned right now is about the same position I'm going to have where I'm actually putting it. So this is really good, perfect. So I don't know if you could tell in the camera, these first two here are perfect. Actually, let me bring you up closer to see what I'm looking at. Okay, so as you can see, these first two boards are almost a clear vertical grain. There's no knots in it at all. And in fact, when we go to the next one, we're kind of about the same. But what I'm going to do is try to arrange these so that the more ugly looking boards are in the back, because I don't want to have to look at them all the time. And there's a knot on the end. Try to line these up. It looks more like I got some more really good ones here. So there's another really nice one. Actually, we've got several of them up here. It looks like I had a board that had a piece of the heartwood in there. You know, some projects that would look great. Sometimes some projects maybe not so great. For this project, not so great is kind of what the category would fall. All right, we got a couple knots here. Move them over here. Only thought to consider when you're doing this is that if your boards are so different that it's so clear that these are good and then those aren't, you may want to rethink how you're organizing it. And actually, me just kind of eyeballing everything, I kind of feel like seeing a bit of a problem on some of them. It looks a little bit off. So I'm going to take a couple more minutes and do some more looking at this, and then I'll catch up with you here in a second. Alright, so the next step to do in all this is to begin gluing them together. And for that, I'm going to use for the first time these really handy bar clamps from Harbor Freight. I've never actually owned these. It might be hard to believe, I know, but I've never owned some, and this was the perfect project to say I needed to go buy some more clamps. So you're going to have that. You need some glue and something to spread your glue. And for that, I've actually got with the glue bot. I really like this thing. It's turned into being a favorite of mine. And then these little bench dog is what they're called, although I know that there is a product or a term for a thing called a bench dog. But this is the brand, I believe, is Bench Dog. And it's a little brush that you can spread the glue. Really, really inexpensive, real cheap. They even give you a thing here. Spread it around. You've got rubber, so once let the glue dry, you can then break the glue off and reuse the brush. I'll put links to these down in the description below. You know, go buy a couple of these. These things last a long time, and they're really, really good. And of course, the glue bot is something that everybody kind of has, and there's different sizes. That's the medium size, I believe. So we're gonna go ahead and glue this up. And before I get started, I'm gonna glue them as I'm gluing this up, because you're gonna see this probably sped up a little bit. Is that as I'm putting all these boards together, I want to really make sure they're in line. I'm going to have to kind of act fast. I'm doing a lot at one time. You know, you could almost split it into two and then come back and connect the two together, but I really want to do this all in one shot. So be good to have a hammer nearby to kind of bang them into place, because I'm trying to keep the tops as flush as possible as I go down the line. Because if you don't do that, very good chance you're going to end up with a warped or twisted board. And you don't want that as your final product, because you just don't want that. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started with gluing this thing up. All right. All right, I got everything together, and this is where I really need to start working fast. I'm sure you noticed at the end of that quick video that I started to try to speed up a little. That's because the glue is obviously starting to set on some of the first ones I did. So I think I'm okay. All right, let's get going here. I'm going to start at this end, and what we're going to do this is clamp it. Alright, snap that in. We're up nice and flush against it all. And we're going to start to tighten it up. kind of having to keep these are being temperamental here. Right. We're going to have to do some tweaking, I think, after all this dries. Alright, just keep trying to squeeze this together a little bit more. Now I got to keep in mind this whole bowing thing, which obviously I bowed it up because the bottom one fell off. Alrighty, well, like I said, I'm learning. Some things are great at Harbor Freight and some just aren't. And this might become a review video at some point soon. Let's go ahead and check this. Alright, it's looking pretty good. I got a couple spots here. Alright. Not looking too bad there. It's definitely... Let's see if I can try to get those out. It's definitely still got a little bit of an issue here. Alright. I think we're okay now. Alright, well, with some unconventional clamping, this is all clamped together. One thing I very much learned was I needed more these bar clamps. My original intention was to have them all on the bottom and have the two longer ones in the center pulling them together, and just did not turn out that way. And in reality, these clamps just cannot even do it. I don't have a ratchet clamp to try. If I did, I would do that. But this is turning out okay. There's a couple spots I'm going to have to probably take my hand plane to, and I'm going to use the belt sander to get a nice smooth edge on this whole thing. And we'll pick that up. But for now, it's going to have to sit here and dry, and we'll rejoin you in the morning. Okay, well, I've taken all my clamps off, and it's looking pretty good. There are definitely a couple places of concern. I've got a little bit of gaps on some of these, but to tell you the truth, I think once I plane this down with my hand plane and then sander and things of that nature, I think all these cracks are going to get filled in, and I'm going to end up putting a coat of some protection on here. Not a whole lot, nothing too major, but just something to give it a little bit of protection and seal it a little bit. But it is looking very square. I've already checked that, and it looks really good. We're going to trim the edges off later. But the first thing I want to do is get all these little pieces of glue off, and then what I'm going to do is take my hand planer and try to get some of these big lips and edges cleaned off. Alright, so the next big step, I'm going to take my orbital sander and give it a good sanding. And like I said, I got a lot of cracks in this. Not totally happy about. I just don't think my clamps did a great job. So I'm not too picky. I'm not too worried about it. I think it's still going to turn out great. So I'm going to just rely on some sawdust, things to kind of fill those holes up. And when I put the finished coat on, it'll kind of fill it in and look pretty good. Alright, so before finishing this with some polyurethane or varnish, whatever I decide to do, I went ahead and cut it to the length, gave it one more really good coat of sanding, just to really get it nice and fine as I really want to for a workshop bench. And then the next step is going to be let it dry, and then I'm going to go ahead and figure out how I'm going to mount it to this wall, put a couple legs for some strength. I have a post I'm going to attach it to that's going to create another place for strength, and it's kind of hiding some of that. But I think before we do that, or maybe after, it just depends how things go, I have an inset shelf that I want to put in here. It's going to house some little things just to kind of keep my workbench clear while I'm working, but it's going to be pretty much the same height as the workbench, so it's almost like an extension of the workbench. It's going to be really neat, something I was thinking would work out pretty good, and I think it's going to work out. Probably paint the interior of that white so that everything kind of you could see it much clearer instead of something being dark and kind of in the shadows. Might even put a little light in there. I don't know. But that's going to be it for this video. It's kind of run longer than the first part, so I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I didn't drag too much at different times, but I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment below if you're liking these. Tell me what you're liking. If there's something that I haven't done yet that you think I should do or maybe consider doing in this workshop. Since this is a small workshop, space is always a premium, so if there's little tips you might have, let me know in the comments below. Please be sure to give me a thumbs up, and please I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already, because this is the second part in the series. The first part is going to be playing as an end card, and you'll be able to click that, watch that, but there's going to be multiple episodes later to come in this series. I have no idea how long this is all going to take, so just join in the fun of building or watching me remodel my tiny workshop. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.